Alright, so I'm just getting started. Just got the wheel off. This is a 2008 Infiniti. We're going to change the left front, which is the driver's side lower control arm. First thing you want to do before you start taking everything apart is there's a few bolts that you're going to want to hit with PB Blaster right away. And it's going to be this one here. There's one on the inside over here. Let's see, right on the other side of this. There's the lower ball joint bolt down there, and there's that bolt there for the front side of the control arm. And the one that I had the most problems with was the shock or the strut bolt. Over here on the front side, you can see right there, this is sway bar end link, which is mounted directly to the shock bolt. What I did on the last one that made it look quite a bit easier was I took this bolt off here and then wiggled this out, and then I was able to slide this out without it binding the bolt too badly. What I did this time as opposed to last time, which I'm hoping will make it easier, was I have both sides up on the car. So that way when I turn the steering wheel, everything sort of turns at the same rate. I had a huge problem getting the strut lined back up into this bracket here on the control arm when I was putting it back together. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. There's 3 mount bolts on the inside. There's one here, which that one's pretty easy to get out. These two were easy to get out as well. This one for the strut that I'm touching here with my finger, that was the hardest one to get out. And one thing that you're going to want to do when you do separate the ball joint, break the nut loose on the ball joint and then hit it with a ball joint splitter while it's still in the car. Trying to get that bushing off the control arm, which you're going to have to reuse. It's a lot harder when it's off of the car. I thought that the new lower control arm came with the bushing already on the ball joint, but it doesn't. It's reusable. And so the parts that I have from Import Direct, I got from O'Reilly's. That's the part number for the lower left side, lower driver's side. And this is the part number here for the lower right side, passenger side. Like I said, I got them from O'Reilly's. They're about $200 each. And here's some of the tools that you're going to need. Obviously a hammer, get everything loose. Dikes to get the cotter pin out of the ball joint. Pry bar to get everything back together. Another smaller pry bar to help adjust everything while you're trying to wiggle the bolts in. You're going to need a couple extensions, 1/2-inch drive, don't use 3/8. Ratchet makes things a little bit easier, but it's mainly going to be breaker bar. 17, 18 millimeter wrench, 19 millimeter wrench, and because I'm missing another 19 millimeter wrench, I have to use this. That's just to stop the sway bar end link from spinning, which is right here. So if you look here, there's actually a spot where you need to put something to keep it from spinning, because it'll spin from the inside. Unfortunately, this car doesn't have the apex bit to stop it from spinning, like I saw in some of the other Nissan videos on YouTube. So I'm going to get started. Like I said, I'm going to hit everything with PB Blaster. Right now, this bolt here for the strut, you're going to have to hit it with a lot of PB Blaster and probably put a socket on it, tap it a bunch of times. I mean, that thing is super tight. Alright, see you guys in a minute. So, Here's the old one from the passenger side, just so you guys know. It's pretty straightforward. Let's get this bracket here, holds the shock strut. So the rear mount, front mount, lower ball joint, right? So on this is what I'm talking about. There's a tapered steel piece that is pressed onto there. It's really tight. But like I said, this is the new one that's going on the driver's side. They don't come with them. So you're going to have to get that other one off. So yeah, it's not difficult. It's physically challenging for the most part. A little bit frustrating. So this is why I lifted up both sides though before I get started. When you're taking that strut bolt off there, you're going to want to cock the wheels all the way to the right. Use a shallow 19mm socket and a breaker bar. Let's see. Yeah. So when you turn the wheels, the disc for the rotors will actually be out of the way, and that'll prevent the socket from turning while you're putting torque on it and stripping the bolt out. I stripped the last one a little bit because I tried to use an extension. It just wasn't working. There's no way that you can really hold it on there and put the right amount of torque on there to break it free at the same time. Another thing to be careful for, your wheel speed sensors, cables, brake lines. Make sure you're not pinching any of that stuff or cutting any of the rubber hoses. That's it. Alright, so for this bolt right here, what I found it's easiest to do is turn the wheels all the way to the right. That'll get your steering linkage out of the way so that you can get to the nut. What I used was a 19mm deep well on this, with a smaller breaker bar. Just to get the nut to spin, as you can see, there's a retainer over here on this side that keeps the bolt from spinning. So once it hits the other side here, it'll stop it and hold it for you. So all you gotta do is just break that initial torque. After that, it's pretty much good to go. So now what I gotta do is I gotta turn the wheels all the way back to the left and get started on that strut bolt. The strut's not gonna jump down or anything. It might extend out just a little bit, but nothing too dramatic that you can't push it back up with a jack real quick. These two bolts on this, really easy. The torque on them was minimal. You can actually hold the top with a wrench, break the torque on the bottom with a breaker bar, 17mm socket, 17mm on the top. That bolt there is a 19mm for the front, or that nut should I say. This one here is a 19mm, and the ball joint bolt is 22mm, same as your wheel lug nuts. And the nut for this linkage here, that's a 17. The inside one is an 18. That's pretty much it. After that, it's just a matter, after you get all these out, it's just a matter of finagling that back out, getting the new one in. Don't forget to split the ball joint while it's still on the car. You can do it off the car. It just takes a lot more effort while you're trying to put your weight on the control arm and smack the ball joint splitter with a hammer. It makes it a little frustrating, but it can be done, just in case you forget. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and finish taking all the rest of this apart, and then show you a couple steps on putting it back together, but it's basically reverse order. The new control arm does come with a cotter key and a new ball joint nut right there. But I mean, you could use any steel cotter key, should be fine. And you shouldn't have to fuck up the old ball joint nut. It fits on there perfectly fine as well. I'm actually using the old one to make sure that the threads don't get messed up on the new one while everything's getting moved around, thrown around. Don't forget your persuasion tool. Helps a lot. Okay. Alright. So, took me all of maybe 15 minutes to get those two mount bolts. That mount bolt broke free of the ball joint. Took me about 25 minutes to get that bad boy off. Or broke free, should I say. So now what I'm going to do is I gotta move the rest of this upper control arm spindle combination out of the way. And while this is still attached to the car, you gotta break that bushing off of that ball joint. As you can see, it's right there. So it's a little difficult. You can't really break it off while it's still inside of there because your ball joint splitter will hit the rotor if the rotor's still on. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop this down, move it all out of the way, and then get a good whack at it while it's still attached to the the car. After that, that's when I'll remove that after I put everything back to center. And then I'll remove those last two bolts there. Alright. Alright. Got the old one out. Like I said, that strut, it pops towards the front of the car once it breaks free from the control arm. So when you're putting the new one back in, you're going to have to push the strut back towards the back of the car to get it to line up with the brackets. There's the rear holder bracket. There's the front bracket there. There's the strut. As you can see, this just wiggles out of the way once you get it all unbolted from everything else. Here's your upper control arms. These ones are good, upper ball joint. It's 3 points. One up here, one up here, one right here. And that's connected to the rest of the spindle arm. Note, so this is the old control arm. It's going to have these two rubber basically dust covers on there. Those need to come off and go on the old one. It's going to have this dust cover on the rear mount. That goes over the top of that, as you can see there. I spent significantly less time getting that bushing off of there. Popped off in about 10 really solid hits. Once you get it wedged in there nice, and you can use your persuasion tool. If you are going to do it while it's on the car, make sure you don't hit the rotors. I didn't, but it was a possibility. But if you're trying to save time, you can chance it, or you could just take the rotors off and the caliper. Like I said, be careful for brake lines, wheel speed sensor wires. I heard those are pretty expensive. I haven't had to buy one, so good to go. So the main reason why I'm changing these lower control arms is I was getting a shimmy problem when I hit the brakes ever since I got the car. So first things first was I replaced the brakes and the rotors. Solved most of the problem, but didn't solve it completely. Progressively got worse and worse. So then I changed this hub first, thinking it was coming from this side. Then I changed the hub on the other side. Still no avail in fixing the problem. So now I'm down to control arms, which is the last thing. Since I've replaced the other one, I've had significantly less wheel shimmy when applying the brakes. So now that I got this one and it's about to go in, that should solve the problem. Like I said, new hubs, new rotors, and now new control arms and lower ball joints. They're all integrated. You can't buy them piece by piece. It's built in to the control arm itself. And this is the bushing that I was talking about here. me see if I can, there it is. So it's just a little cone-shaped bushing, goes on the ball joint arm and drops into your spindle. You will definitely have problems if you don't put that in when you're putting the new one on. Alright, so I'm going to start putting everything back together now, and I'll stop about halfway through and show you guys where I'm at. Alright, as you can see, I just went ahead and put the whole rest of it in. I mean, it's all reverse order, pretty self-explanatory. One thing I noticed, when you're putting the control arm back in, it's easier to dip it down with the ball joint towards my elbow down like this first, like this way, and then run in the front mount and then tilt the back one into place. So what I did was I reconnected the strut first, jacked it up, used a pry bar to line up the front mount hole. These rear mounts are what gave me the problem on the install on both sides now. It seems to want to twist upwards and out, so sort of this way. So what you have to do is stick a pry bar in here, wedge it, push it down until the back bolt is lined up, drop the back bolt in, start the nut, and then you take a pry bar in right here and you push this way and drop this bolt in. As you can see, this one went back in rather easily. It's a lot easier when you take off that sway bar in link. If not, it'll bind as you're trying to pound this bolt back out, because it won't spin over far enough. And then you got your lower ball joint there. You know, as you can see, I put the wedge back in, or the bushing, or whatever the fuck it's called. And I did have to disconnect, not really disconnect, but unhook this to be able to get the spindle arm to swing over far enough to where I could get a pry bar in there without beating anything up. But that's pretty much it. So now, like I said, 17 millimeter bolt on the top with a 17 millimeter nut on the bottom there. 19 millimeter bolt holds itself on the other side. 19 millimeter bolt there, 22 millimeter bolt on the ball joint, and then cotter key it, throw your tire back on, test drive it, should be good to go. Alright. Oh, and one last thing, this is PB Blaster. This is your friend. It's penetrating oil, it helps a lot.